Hey folks, welcome back and blessed 2023. Hopefully this one will be a hell of a lot more gentle with the collective. Fingers crossed. I'm feeling a little out of practice, so instead of prepping, I've just grabbed some bits and we're going to sit here and do the usual monthly wrap up kind of reflections, practice sharing and favourites / newbies. I'll be honest, getting straight into it, because as I say, I'm feeling very out of practice. I haven't YouTubed in, I want to say, at least 3 weeks, which doesn't sound a lot, but on top of that I also didn't do any Patreon stuff, so I had a month away from my Patreon, paused all the charges for everyone and just took a month away. I really needed to do that for my sanity and my well-being. I have had some unfortunate new health stuff arise, which made December turn into this this chaos of health appointments and tests, which were spread out throughout the month, but for 2.5 weeks in particular, I had an appointment either every day or every other day, and it was incredibly exhausting. It's quite diminishing being in the hospital or in medical environments that regularly as well, especially when you've got some medical trauma, but it's just the way things are. So December looked very different in comparison to my usual experience anyway. There's always health stuff, but it's not usually that intense. And now is a waiting game. I won't get any results for a while. So with that in mind, my practice was quite pared back. But there are some things that I figured I could come on and share with you still. And then because we do celebrate Christmas, albeit secular, it's not my favourite festivity in the world, but I do participate because I have younger siblings. And I think it's nice for them until they decide what they want to do when they're older. At least one of them's particularly young. So I have some goodies that I thought I would share as well, but that is rather material. So we'll do a little bit of talking first. As you can see, no candle, no nice drink. I've got various altar workings pushed off to the sides so that they're out of the way. I couldn't get the camera angle right today. This will have to do. So I'll try and insert some pictures for the few things I'm going to talk about before we dive into like stuff. And it is going to be a bit stuff heavy, because unless you want to listen to that whole emotional unraveling of December, which I'm sure that you don't, this is what I've got. It snowed in December in England, which is very novel nowadays, and I am generally not a fan just because the cold hurts. It makes my conditions worse, but also because we're just so underprepared. So as soon as anything turns into ice, no one can drive, there's accidents everywhere, it's chaos. My Canadian friends must have been in bits because it's a shocking contrast. But we had snow. Before that we had a really fascinating frost actually, so I'll start with that. I don't usually go out, but I wanted to get some fresh air and be just not in a building, especially when that building was so often a medical environment. So I went out, and at first I was noticing all of the frost in the garden and kind of mourning all of the garden spiders, because they're my little friends throughout the year. They're particularly one of my favourite spiders to watch and engage with. I photo them a lot throughout the year. I'm sure that their little egg sacs are nestled away somewhere safely, but all that was left was the remnants of their webs. But I did get some fascinating pictures of these, and I was left kind of contemplating the usual things about life and death, and how I had fallen into the season of winter. And for me, because of course winter is different for everyone dependent on where you are in the world. So I did feel like I really wanted to go into that hibernation period. And of course, with all of the health stuff and the way that society here sort of as a collective pushes Christmas and stuff, and it was very, very busy. So I took moments out in the frost, and then the snow came, and there was very little to no wind chill, which was nice because it meant that I could still go out in the snow. We had a few walks. We went to the duck pond, and the ducks in particular, obviously there's a lot of other animals there, but they were having a lot of fun between the frozen part of the lake and the bit that had melted. It was like watching them walk across water sometimes as well, because the top layer had melted. It was some it was some impressive illusionary stuff going on, and it was really nice just to be out and about. So we went over and did some of that. I had a play in the snow with the neighbour's cat, even though, like I said, not a fan of snow. I knew that it would warm him up. He's basically adopted us, and he had a lot of fun, so I'll try and add a picture of that as well because he's adorable. And yeah, my partner and I on the lead up to Christmas just tried to get out for a few walks whilst I could, in between everything. Lots of nature observation, lots of time in just on my own in sort of quiet contemplation, thinking about things, probably overthinking about some things as well, but I basically tried to lean into needing to hibernate and wanting to hibernate by paring back on anything that I did have control over, like I say, so that it would help me for January. But I did do some crafty bits as well, and one of those was my first ever time creating candles. This is one of two. They came in a kit that my partner bought me a while ago for just whenever I felt up to it. Not gonna lie, completely lost my train of thought because the cat is charging around the kitchen having a grand old time. But yes, these came in a kit anyway, and it was, I think it had like a cherry blossomy kind of scent to it. The only thing I didn't have was like a metal thermometer, which apparently are key to making any candles. So the fact that these were successful is a tiny miracle. But yeah, they're scented, but they didn't come with the extra bits. I wanted to personalise them. This has some lavender on it from a family member's garden. There's a tiny bit of thistle rocking around in here now because my cat managed to find my dried thistle and attack it. So there's a small bit from when I foraged that, and some crystals that I have either had in other candles that I've purchased or in random things that people have sent me. So I basically just kind of garnished both of them and wrapped one up for my stepmum, and this is mine, of which I will probably burn sometime soon now I've shared it. It was a really fun experience, and I'm often trying to find crafts that don't hurt my body. So it's always nice to find something that didn't upset my hands in particular either, didn't cause any sort of strenuous issues. Very fun. I enjoyed it a lot. And before I jump into like stuff, despite my stomach and a few other things going balmy after all my hospital appointments and me not feeling well, I did manage to enjoy Christmas Day. We saw my partner's family in two sections, and so it was very busy. And then we went to my family's and we had food, and it was freaking amazing. It was absolutely lovely. I think my favourite part of the dish this year, because I haven't eaten with them for quite a few years on Christmas, was actually the 𝗺cie. So the 𝗺cie, if I'm remembering its name correctly anyway, is like a I want to say spiced carrot kind of dish with, I think it had sultanas in it this year, but I'm sure that my grandfather said it usually has raisins. I don't know. Anyway, it was it was lovely. It was lovely. But I also am basically a massive roast potato fan, and my stepmom, she makes the best roast potatoes in the world. I shit you not, they're amazing. So yeah, it was a very good time. I kind of wanted to focus on the few good bits that I dragged out of, and otherwise just, yeah, I don't know how to summarise the rest of December. It was just incredibly stressful. It really pushed me to a part of my tether that I don't wish to return to, and I'm really looking at doing some restorative work for the coming year. So that was long. I've put some pictures in for you. I tried to make it interesting. Let's just get into the stuff, because as I say, it was a bit of a weird and wonderful month. I pared my practice down, and let's lean over there and get those. What that meant is that I didn't pull loads and loads and loads of cards, but I worked with the Fallen Angels. This is a shiny ass deck, so apologies for that. Now until sort of mid-spring, my lighting's going to be horrendous, so this is as good as it gets, and that includes the deep shine that we're going to get reflection-wise from the lights above. And I pulled no more than, I think, 3 of these across the whole of December. The Fallen Angels, okay, the demons, I work with them quite intimately, and I expect them to be quite challenging. And what was really interesting, the 3 that I drew one, I think I worked with for 2 weeks, then another for 1, then another for 1, were all incredibly gentle. And I mean, it is quite a balanced deck, but there are a lot of very challenging energies in here and keywords, and very strangely it was like, it really just like a tangible agreement between the 2 of us energetically that I just wasn't down for that. It was probably a bit of a risky move working with them, but actually they reciprocated in kind. It just felt like a very affirmative spirit engagement, and I think that would surprise people from demon work if they don't ever do it. And it's definitely not the sole way that I would encapsulate working with them, but it was really lovely. So they took pride of place on my moth, which, as you can see, it only takes 1 card. I usually just lay the rest elsewhere. And then I used the Trinofi illustrated to pull a couple of cards occasionally to sort of expand upon the message, but they wouldn't stay out for as long as the demon. So it was just kind of like more of a daily check-in. I really enjoy the 2 decks together. I think they go together quite beautifully. This one gives it that playful flair, but still has some, I don't think darker tones is quite the message, but there's an undercurrent of something sort of sneaky, cheeky, thiefy going on in this, which I like how those 2 then balance each other out for that type of energy. So definitely a deck pairing that I highly recommend. I've been having a lot of fun with deck pairings actually, especially since I've had the Trinofi, because I was pairing it with the Memento Mori before that as well. And then the only other deck that's not entirely new that was worked with really, I worked with a couple of others but not enough to mention them, was the Woodland Wardens, and I only worked with the 1. So this is the Deer and Oat, the keywords healing. And because I wasn't doing my Patreon stuff, I simply allowed myself to pull myself an animal for the month and do an animal gnosis just entirely for myself, which, because I do collective stuff over there and I work with the animal with everyone, and that's really fun, but it was kind of nice just to have something that I could really, really personalise to my own practice and where I'm at. The animal part obviously comes very natural to me because of my because of my work and because of all of the studies that I do and all of that good stuff and the interests. I'm not great with various plants and things, so that's one of the reasons why I like the mix of this deck. It's a bit of comfort and something a bit new. From what I understand, this is a fallow deer, and I actually have a fallow deer shed, so one of these up on my altar where these cards sit. So I did some ritual with that, which I'm not going to explain much more, but I use them as ritual aids. So it wasn't on the altar when I was working with it, I was holding it. But also when I saw Oak come up with it, I started rebuying. There's this little oat and chia seed coconut type porridge pots. So I've been having that in the morning for breakfast as a kind of nourishing, warming effect again. And yeah, just bringing oat into my life a little bit, because I hadn't really been having many oats. And I also, my partner took me out for this fantastic breakfast in the city at somewhere where they catered to all of my main allergies and intolerances, which there's quite a few. And I got brought out this, I suppose it is a sweet muffin creation, but not overly sweet. A lot of the things that were sweetened in it were natural. So it had cranberries in it. I think they'd use honey to try and stick the oats together. And there was a lot of different oats and walnuts in it. And it was freaking awesome. It's one of the best things I've ever tasted. So oat definitely did show up a lot. I do love this deck. It's freaking gorgeous. I actually, for this month's animal gnosis, so in January we're working with Spider, and although I didn't pull it from this deck because Spider actually just rocked up into my world a few days before January, I always like to take a picture of a deck, so I pulled the Spider card from this and it's on my altar. It's a very beautiful representation. It's a lovely deck. I'm really enjoying it. I can see it featuring a lot in what I do this coming year. And then we get into new stuff. So I've got 3 decks and a bunch of books and probably not much else to say. So it is, like I said, a little bit material focused in kind of, this is all new, which feels very strange because the year was very quiet mostly. And then the latter part of the year was when I got gifted decks, both for my birthday and for Christmas, and they all came in towards the end of the year. So it's felt very deck heavy, but I didn't really bring much else in, so it has balanced itself out nicely. My youngest brother, bless him, saved up and got me the Anima Mundi tarot, which is something that had been on my wish list for a very, very, very long time. So this was one of my Christmas presents. I got some really cool presents from my other brother as well. I obviously am not going to show you things that just, I show some bits that aren't relevant to, you know, relevant to what people want to see, but I try not to overdo it. But yeah, basically I got some really cool Lego and some cards. But this is the Anima Mundi tarot. I haven't used it too much yet, but I did have a really cool experience with this on Christmas Day, where I pulled a card and my grandfather, like I said, aka step grandfather for anyone confused, he actually read my card for me, and it was a really interesting reading. It was lovely having someone else read for me for a change. And I got quite a lot from it, but it also sparked a lot of ideas for me in terms of some of the stuff that I want to do moving forward with my tarot offerings as well. So that was really fun. I got the Reclaim Oracle. It came before Christmas, but I didn't open it until the day, but I got that with some Christmas money that I was given in advance, so that I could pick my own thing. and I have many plans for this oracle. I'm so glad to have the Boutique London, I believe that's her tag name, another indie shop basically in the UK pop up, because there's not a lot of access to indie decks over here. Very thankful for that shop, very excited about this deck. I did pull a card from this deck asking it to give me the word for the year, because I didn't feel like thinking one up myself. And my word for the year was trust, which was very fitting indeed. So a very good pull from that. I don't think I will share my intentions with that deck too much until I get around to it, because I have been carving out intentions for that deck since probably about 4 months before maybe even longer than I committed to actually buying it. I knew it would be a good one in my practice, even for therapeutic work with clients. It's very expressive and the artwork feels kind of abstract. It doesn't feel like people are being shown to me so much as archetypes, which I like. I think that makes it more visually accessible for people, especially with the two-tone colouring. And then finally, we got this for an absolute steal. I got quite a bit of money off of this, so I finally pulled the trigger and got the 𝗵𝘁𝗿𝗄𝗃 tarot, and I loved it so much during the walkthrough of it on Instagram that I decided to pull my cards for my year ahead spread from this. Along with, I also used the Memento Mori, which is one that I used last year as the oracle portion, and I used my runes, which I also used last year. But yes, I switched out the Marigold Tarot, which I'll just use normally this year, and pulled them from this. And it was really interesting. I don't really pay much attention to what comes out initially, and I work with and reflect on the cards that I've got month to month. So of course it's predictive by nature to pull the cards that far ahead, but I don't work with it in such a directive capacity, and I found a way that really sinks into a sweet spot for me. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, minor sort of quibbles about this deck, mainly that the Lovers card contextually confuses me, albeit beautiful, in terms of the rest of the deck theme. The rest of the deck seems to be this otherworld kind of spirit fae meshing. Of course there are different representations of human and human-like figures, but I just found it to kind of stand out in the deck. It feels a little bit jarring in comparison to the rest. So I'm really interested to hear other people's thoughts on that, and I'm going to continue to keep looking into it. But anyway, let's get on to books, because they're the last things. I'm not going to open this because I've already given you a look at it from last time, and I'm always worried when I open it that I'm going to show something like a spread, or I don't know. I just like to be mindful when I'm sharing people's books of, when you're sharing like a snippet of information, what part you're giving away. So I'll review this when I finish it, but I'm really enjoying it. And I think that the main thing for me is that this is a very accessible book for beginners. It has a very focused discussion of divination, because obviously it's about seances. So rather than just reading basic meanings for any kind of tarot or any kind of tea reading, or, you know, insert divination that's in this book, it's more specified to spirit work. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, but very helpful. I appreciate that. And there's also a lot of history in here, which, whilst there are always missing parts from history, and of course history is not always written by unbiased or balanced or varied individuals either. History is still important to me always, in terms of I suppose knowing that the author knows where something comes from, but also having a baseline for myself if and when I don't know, and then I can go and look into that further as well. So I think this book does a very good job of encompassing all of that. And yes, for the intermediate there is still going to be information in there that I feel is going to be valuable, because I know that I haven't tried all of these divination approaches. So whilst reading the tarot section was a lot quicker for me, reading some of the other sections which I've been working through are something that I am then putting into practice and spending time with, and that's very fun. It's quite hard, I think, to create a book for all practitioners, and I think that this one does a particularly good job at being approachable and concise, not lacking, you know, the information that's needed, but also giving you quite a varied array of approaches. And I think that it's the varied array that kind of reaches out to more people. I don't know if that makes sense. What else? Some of these are more, you know, witchy than others. There's nothing tarot. I've got something rune. Let's do the one that I'm actually also reading. I got this with some Christmas money when we went to the city. I got it from the very well-known Watkins, because I like to support them, and this has been on my wish list for the longest time. I work with both the Elder Futhark and the Northumbrian runes, also named the Anglo-Saxon, depending on what terminology you're more familiar with. So I work with both sets, but I'm studying both sets, and it's harder to get, in my experience so far, worthwhile material on the Northumbrian. Nigel Pennick so far has done a beautiful job of, again, including the history, and the history is so important to understanding how the Northumbrian runes came to be and what happened in Britain, aka Northumbria, at the time, with people coming into the country and how syncretism occurred and all of that good stuff. So I haven't even got to the runes yet, but I have only read this for 2 days. I'm really trying to up my reading again this year, but I'm really enjoying it so far. And I think rune books can be really hit and miss, unfortunately, in particular. Also from Watkins, but before a visit before then and put away for Christmas, I grabbed these two. They're not really zines, but they're not quite books either, and you can see I've just gone for random issues. So this one's Samhain 2021 and this one's July 2022, but I was more interested in the content than anything else, and I am very excited to read these, which once I finish at least one of the 2 books I've just mentioned, I'll move on to these. So just to give you an idea, some of the titles in this one is Children of the Night, The Cold Pool. It's actually very hard for me to see the writing. It's easier for you on the camera than it is for me. Folk horror tropes, old stories and new mythologies. And yeah, they're write-ups. Oh, how cool is that? It would help if I'm in frame. That's always useful. Yeah, they're like little essays, stories, write-ups of folk and folk horror, which very fitting for my practice and interests. And as you can imagine, so is this one. So this one is a lot of, if I'm remembering correctly, a lot of devil-focused pieces. And that's something that I'm looking into more and more and more. So here we've got Conjuring the Cunning Man, The Devil's Prayer Book, Hell is Other Readers, The House of the Great Beast, The Land Between God and the Devil. And again, aside from the glorious visuals in these books, oh, Technologies of the Seance Room. Look at that. I'm very excited to read both of these, and I figured that if I get on with them, then I can pick up some more issues in the future. I think that I'm going to have a good time with them. I decided to get this because when I come across this, I had been writing about liminality, my experience with liminality in that particular time, how liminality can vary between very difficult expressions of it and obviously the more self-induced ritualistic aspects of it, liminality in tarot. I was really getting into it over on Patreon specifically, and then I found this book, and it's The Girl from the Other Side. I really love sort of manga, anime stuff, but I haven't read any for a very long time, and I wanted to give this one a go. It's actually quite hard to find them in singles sometimes over here, so I may have to, if I like it, repurchase. It's the first 3 are in like a hardback set. I don't like hardback books, but we'll see. I have to read you the back. Once upon a time, in a land far away, there were 2 kingdoms, the outside, where twisted beasts roamed that could curse with a touch, and the inside, where humans lived in safety and peace. The girl and the beast should never have met, but when they do, a quiet fairy tale begins. This is a story of 2 people, one human, one inhuman, who linger in the hazy twilight that separates night from day. I mean, if that's not more liminal space messages for me, then I don't know what is. So very excited to read this. It actually looks pretty short in terms of, you know, narrative and how much per page, which I'm not gonna lie, works for me, but the essence of it just really called to me. Very happy to get this in my grubby little paws. And then I asked for this for Christmas, which was from my grandparents. And this is Rewild Yourself, 23 Spellbinding Ways to Make Nature More Visible. Originally, I was hoping to do a Patreon book club with it. But because not all of it actually, but some of it focuses a lot in obviously the British land, because that's where the person's from. I didn't know how my very mixed grouping of Patreon people would feel about it. And also I haven't read it, so whether it's good or not, I don't know. But I liked the concept of it because it was already something that I was weaving into content workings and offerings for this year moving forward. And so to then stumble upon a book that was talking about the very thing I'd been thinking about was, you know, it felt too synchronistic to kind of not give it a go. And again, it's one that it's actually not very long at all. The chapters are pretty short also. I think it will be an incredibly easy read, but and perhaps for me, maybe it will be too much of what I already do. But I have to give these things a chance to be able to recommend them to other people. And when it comes to rewilding, land-based stuff, nature stuff, I don't mind every now and then getting a few things that perhaps aren't necessarily going to add loads more to my practice, but can be things that are but more base level that I can recommend to others, because that makes sense for what I offer. Especially because a lot of the time when people come into witchcraft and talk about animals or spirit work, it can be from only those facets of animals, and it kind of puts them, which I've said before, in this separated, non-physical, non-everyday relationship. And of course our wildlife needs us, and the animals are right outside our door, and insects and all of these other things, and I like not to just turn them into a spiritual convenience. So a lot of the books that I recommend for people doing animal workings or death work or anything like that are often nothing to do with witchcraft, but kind of adjacent to, because they're nature books. So that's a book section I spend a lot of time in. Other than that, I have one other book that I'm going to show you and tell you that one of the other main things. I actually have, by the way, just quickly, my main, not that this isn't all a glorious array, but my main present from my parents and from my partner are coming from the Ukraine, and therefore understandably they are not here yet. I really wanted to support a Ukrainian artist for one of the things that I purchased for Christmas. And as many people may know by now, I work with Hwæt and Odin, so I have a figurine of both of those coming to me at some point, and perhaps I'll be able to show them to you next month. But I also nerded out. I played some Pokemon on the Switch. I played a game which now I can't remember the name of, which is frustrating, but my partner and I got a game to play together. The narrative is terrible. Storyline, it's so bad it's funny at points. It's basically a 2-player game where one of you is one parent, the other's the other parent. You turn into these little Stitch figurines and you have to play helping each other the whole way through. Kind of has a little bit of a vibe of if you've ever played 2 players on Little Big Planet. Yeah, it has like that kind of collaborative vibe, but you are collaborative the whole way through. So one of you might have a tool that does one part of the thing, but the other one has the what's the word I'm looking for? The complementary tool to go with it. And it's been so much fun. We just skipped the storyline. I'm sure some people would watch it. My partner never watches any storyline, so the fact that it's bad and the graphics on the storylines are awful as well, so we skip it. But the actual gameplay and the graphics while you're playing are really good. So I don't really understand how that happened. But it's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. So if that's something you play the Switch and you've got someone that you can play it with, I don't have any other games that require a second person with, without fail, because I tend to be solitary witch, solitary game player. But if I can lure my partner into playing something with me, always a bonus. And yeah, I got my nerd on and got this, which I also got a folder to put all of my Pokemon cards in. And I'm not going to tell you too much about my relationship with Pokemon. Should anyone actually be genuinely interested, I wouldn't mind doing just a Pokemon specific card show and tell, because I do have not very many, unfortunately, sad times, but some of the cards from when Pokemon cards were released, showing my age, of course. So I have some of the originals. I actually have my promo card from when I went to see Pokemon the movie at, obviously, the cinema. So yeah. But I got a Pokemon Encyclopaedia, some cards, a really cool advent calendar from my partner, which basically just brought me a lot of nerdy joy and kept me sane throughout December. And yeah, I love this book. My only complaint about this, for anyone who mildly cares, and of course a new one of these comes out every year, so they date pretty quickly, but I don't have any, so aside from some walkthroughs and some Pokedexes. So I got this, and yeah, my only complaint is per game they've done them in alphabetical order, which is not a massive problem. I prefer to see them with their evolutions directly next to each other, because my brain is full of mush a lot of the time, and it would have just been a nice addition. But other than that, it's actually really fun if you're nerdy, and especially if you started out playing the original Pokemon games like myself, then you go all the way back and read about Ash's Pokemon, and it's just an absolutely nerdy joy, of which I got for a steal. I've been very lucky in finding things at the right time on the run up to Christmas, and this was half price, I think. So yeah, that's me. That was longer than I thought it was going to be, but I told you, a lot of stuff, a lot less reflections. It was a interesting month. There was some really good moments in it, and they do hold a lot of strength in my memory, thankfully, but it was a very, very difficult month in particular. And New Year's Eve really just kicked us in between the legs and went out in the way that the whole year had gone. So as much as I don't like to say, I hope 2023 is better, like I said, I kind of do. And not just for myself, as a collective. So we shall see, but it's nice to be back. I'm going to be doing more videos this year, keeping up a little bit with the pace. Obviously, I have to prioritise Patreon, especially when my health gets challenging. But I do want to be here on YouTube more, and I am going to be doing more deck reviews because that's something I enjoy, really sharing with you my personalised experience with the decks after owning them, some of which quite some time. So it's not going to be all the newest and brightest new decks out there, but it will be like an experiential sharing, hopefully. And it looks like we're going to be starting off with the Wildwood based on the poll. So if you don't want the Wildwood to be the first one, I would encourage you to go and vote. But yeah, thank you for hanging out with me. Feel free to tell me about your December, even if it's that you're glad that it's gone. And I will see you soon. Bye.